We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And we're back here on Liberty Nation Radio, continuing our discussion on the Supreme Court, the new term, and specifically what we've just finished talking about in the first segment, and now carrying on this discussion, the composition of the court, the attacks from the right and the left, and what's likely to happen to the court going forward. And we're joined once again by Scott D. Cosenza, Liberty Nation's legal affairs editor, host of the excellent Uprising podcast, and a self-admitted, once attended an actual Supreme Court deliberation. Thanks for being back here, Scott.
More than once, even.
Wow, well done, well done. That makes you like a season ticket holder to the Supreme Court.
I wish.
We just finished talking about the numerous accusations, situation Justice Clarence Thomas finds himself in. But let's spread this out a little bit further. We see a lot of calls for an expansion of the Supreme Court. Now, again, this kind of brings me back to the very first point we made in the show today. If the left is the group calling for an expansion of the Supreme Court now, presumably and quite obviously, because they want to dilute the conservative branch, which is in the majority at present.
Mark, just because every single one of these calls to expand the court happened after conservatives started winning cases, how dare you suggest that this is some outcome-based effort on behalf of those lefty legal scholars?
Scott, I dare. I'll even tell you in Chinese.
What other evidence is there to suggest that they're motivated by the outcome of cases rather than
let's go back to the deal would you take, Scott? Let's go back to that. So let's say Democrats propose let's expand the court by 4 or 5. And they say, and then they make the deal. They say, and we'll do that, and the Republicans can choose the justices. Does that go ahead? Yes or no? It doesn't happen,
absolutely
right?
not.
It doesn't happen in the reverse, which means it is political. And
it's totally political. And the answer for those of us who are small government advocates who wish to adhere to the founders' vision of liberty for the people is that fewer issues of import should be decided by the Supreme Court. They shouldn't be government issues at all. The idea that the Supreme Court is so important is true, but it's because every issue now seems to be either, or every behavior almost is either forbidden or mandatory. The sphere of human behavior that's fully free continues to shrink. And that means that it's ever important. Who makes the rules, right? But if there are fewer rules and more behavior that's open for freedom, then it's less important as to who decides things, because there's less to decide and there's less impact on our lives. And I think that is for conservatives and libertarians to really get behind, the notion that the sphere of our lives that is subject to government influence should be shrunk.
So what you're saying is that use of courts should be safe, rare, and legal. Is that?
And I mean it, unlike the people who've said that about other things, perhaps.
Absolutely. I can't think what you might be talking about there, Scott. Now, so the court packing, is it going to happen, though? Is there a realistic path?
It's not going to happen.
Okay. Why?
What
mechanisms are in place to stop it?
There's just not the political will to do it. Joe Biden kind of rejected the plan he commissioned to put forth, which I think was to mollify some of the more radical progressive.
Yeah, so that you're talking about he signed, I think it was an executive order to come up with a report that would suggest ways in which, I think anybody who knows how these government reports go, it will kind of say what Joe Biden wants it to say. That's
the funny thing is, it's like if you commissioned me to write a report about what new gun control law, how can we reduce gun violence in America, that I'm not going to suggest increasing gun control laws, because of the past experience you've had with my exposition of these ideas. So it's no mystery where things are going to come out for certain things. So it was no mystery. But then at the same time, he rejected the idea of going ahead with it. Now, you can say that he rejected it because of his thoughtful examination of our legal system and thinking that it's not the right course of action, or that the politics didn't support that move and they didn't want a loss on their hands. They want the fight and to lose the fight.
So where would that fight take place, though? Wouldn't that fight ultimately take place in the Supreme Court anyway?
No. That would be a Senate fight, maybe all of Congress. But the size of the Supreme Court is not set by our U.S. Constitution, and it has varied over the course of our history. And so if the president and the Congress, that's one of the ways they can actually exert significant influence on the court, is through the appointment process, not just by filling vacancies, but adding new members if they so desire. They would have to act in concert to do it. The president nominates justices for the Supreme Court, so it's not like with an uncooperative president, Congress could do it on its own. And the number of justices is authorized by Congress. And of course, I don't know that, except for Harlan Crow, many people could take that job and not get paid for it. And they authorize that they have the power of the purse. So in a very real sense, they authorize the judge to take the person to take that job by paying them.
Okay. And the most recent addition to the Supreme Court was Ketanji Brown Jackson. And she was afforded the seat due to the retirement of Justice Stephen Breyer. Now, that didn't upset the makeup. There were still 5 conservatives, 3 liberal, and Chief Justice John Roberts, who nobody really knows where he stands, which is probably a good thing, really, for a Chief Justice. But do we see any other retirements coming up between now and the next election in 2024, or during the following term of presidency?
I think that I like your statement there about the Chief Justice, and I think you're right. It is probably a good thing that he's not firmly in one ideological camp in a country that is pretty deeply divided, and where these issues are very contentious, and the court deals with so many of them. You know, Justice Roberts is not Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He's Chief Justice of the United States of America, and I like that. In some aspect, it's good that that he can be the Chief Justice of all of us. We won't see any retirements or new justices, I believe. The liberals are young, and they're not going to retire anytime soon. I don't see Justice Kagan, who I think is like 65-ish. Lifespans are getting longer, and people are more vibrant into their older ages. So I would expect that we would only see, Supreme Court justices sitting for longer and longer on the bench. Justice Thomas is 75 years of age. He is, I think, the oldest sitting justice, and one would imagine that given his life, he would be loath to retire during a term of a president who would immediately replace him with someone who would take to his decisions with a crowbar, metaphorically, and break them apart. And a jackhammer, actually, is what I should have said. So that's what he could expect with any justice that President Biden might appoint, and that the current, Democrat leadership in the Senate would get through. So it's also a thing to consider for the next presidential election, meaning he's 75.
Something to think about. Scott, thanks ever so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Mark.
And that's all we have time for on today's Supreme Court Special Edition. I'd like to thank our fount of all legal knowledge, Mr. Scott D. Cosenza, Esquire, for his input today. And of course, I'd like to thank you, the audience, for taking the time to join us. William Howard Taft once said, "Presidents come and go, but the Supreme Court goes on forever." And in many ways, he was absolutely right in the scope of that. Decisions made by the highest court have the potential to shape the future in ways that no president really can. An idea that's best exemplified by the words of Teddy Roosevelt, who said, quote, "The president and Congress are all very well in their way. They can say what they think, but it rests with the Supreme Court to decide what they have really thought." Just something to think about there. Thanks for listening. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech. We are LibertyNation.com.